Hi guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Sennheiser Momentum True Wireless. Now these earphones cost £280 and in the US can be found for $300. If you live elsewhere, the locally link in the description below will take you to your localized Amazon store, including the UK and US respectively. Now over their predecessors, there have a few different improvements that Sennheiser implemented. First of all, battery life has massively improved. You've got active noise cancellation technology built in, and I'll get into this in just a bit. You've also got slightly smaller design so they don't stick out as much, and I'll comment on that in a while. And furthermore, you've got more controls where you can actually customize what the touch controls actually do, whereas in the previous iteration you're pretty much locked as to what Sennheiser wanted you to have. So without further ado, let's get into this review. So first off, let's talk about what you get in the box. You've got a USB to USB Type-C cable, which is quite short, worth bearing that in mind, a manual, a bunch of silicone tips, and of course the earphones themselves with their carrying case. Now the carrying case is a little bit chunky in comparison to some of its competitors, which I'll bring into shot over here. However, it's very stylish due to the fabric design that it's got. It's got a USB Type-C charging port at the back and a button over here which gives you an indication of what's happening. It's charging the earphones, or if it's fully charged, it goes green when it's connected up. Now the earphones themselves, as I mentioned before, have slightly become slightly thinner. However, that is very minor. They still do stick out a little bit from your ears, and I'll show you this after. Now the earphones have touch sensitive buttons. Now they're somewhat of a love-hate relationship for me. On one hand, I do like that when you tap them once, they do play and pause, and they're really good and sensitive in that respect. On the other hand, sometimes when I get my earphones out and I put them down, they just seem to respond to a touch button. So even when I put them down and touch them, they'll accidentally start playing some music. And that's something that I'm not usually accustomed to with other touch-sensitive earphones such as the Libratone Track Air Plus, which have also got touch-sensitive controls. Furthermore, the double tap function or the triple tap function, which allows you to, let's say, skip a song, go back and things like that, is just a little bit too slow to respond. In other words, the single tap works fine, but when I double tap, sometimes it'll only respond as a single tap. Triple tap it sometimes, it'll even respond as a double tap. So sometimes it just misses it out, and you have to be very precise as to where you tap it and when you press it. Whereas the Libratone Track Air Plus, again as an example, are a lot more forgiving and just a lot better in terms of responsiveness. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Now, other than that, in terms of the battery life, it's worth bearing in mind that these earphones have significantly improved over their predecessors. The original True Wireless had around 4 hours of playback time, whilst the new ones have around 7 hours of playback time. So it's almost doubled. In terms of the battery life of the case itself and the earphones themselves, you'll get around 28 hours versus around 11 hours of its predecessors. Now that's pretty good. However, in comparison to some of its competitors, even cheaper competitors, they offer better battery life. So I'd like to see Sennheiser actually push out the boat and maybe offer even 35 hours of playback time with 10 or 11 hours per earphone. However, that's not the case, and unfortunately you'll just have to make do with that. Now before moving on to the app, I'll also like to mention that these earphones are IPX4 certified. In other words, you can have light, rain or sweat and they won't be affected. So as we move on to the Sennheiser Sound Control app, I also want to mention Bluetooth connectivity. These have Bluetooth 5.1 and support the aptX, AAC and SBC codecs. I had no issues in terms of latency between my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus and the earphones. There was no video lag, delay or lip sync issues to report. Given the aptX codec, that's pretty much a given. However, it was just worth noting, and if you're on iPhone, you'll be able to use AAC, which is pretty flawless for Apple users. Now the app itself is pretty comprehensive, however it has a few flaws, I would say. So for example, you've got controls, smart pose, active noise cancellation, auto accept call, side tone. That's great to see. Earbuds customization, really nice to see again. You can customize the buttons and what they do. For example, play and pause, you can customize that. So if I were to hold this down, you can see over here, I can change this to one of the functions I've got over here. In my case, I prefer media controls. However, you can also have activate your voice assistant if you so wish. The thing I don't quite get, and the same thing that I found with the older variant, is its equalizer preset. Now the equalizer preset is somewhat odd. The reason why is because it hasn't got got different bands that you can adjust. Instead, it's got one single thing, which somewhat skews the sound quality in one way or another. For me, I found it actually in the center point gave you the best sort of sound and didn't skew either the treble or the bass in a weird way. I would have liked a separate band equalization, or like for example 5-band equalizer, to be available here for users. Interestingly enough, on the home page you can see that you've got transparent hearing. So transparent hearing you can enable. You can enable it also when music is playing, or you can have that disabled if you so wish. So it's also useful to have that, and you can again enable that via tap function or a double tap function, whatever you want to set via the earphones when they're in your ear. Surprisingly, it was a bit weird not to see that the ANC function was not mentioned over here. Instead, you have to go into settings and find it there. Now, moving on from the app, there is one other thing I do want to mention. Their originals, the predecessors of these earphones, had a notorious problem of not switching off when placed in the case. Sometimes they would just continue playing music, and the only way you'd be able to switch them off was to force hard reset them. They also sometimes had Bluetooth connectivity issues where they'd automatically reconnect, or sometimes completely lose the connection from your source device. I can safely say that wasn't an issue with the version 2s. They have no issues whatsoever, and each time I tried to do some tests to try and make it fail, so to speak, it just wouldn't. It just worked flawlessly. Now, moving on from that, I do want to show you how they look like in the ear. You can see that the design of the earphones is still very stylish. You've still got that sort of silver design, and you can see that the earphones don't stick out as much as their predecessor did. So in this respect, the slightly slimmer design is great and improved, and the look is very stylish. I will say, however, if you're a gymaholic or someone who's going to be working out with these earphones, you might want to be wary about them, because there's no over-the-ear hooks, there's no ear fins, or there's no way of these earphones not kind of slipping out over time. You will sweat naturally in your ear, and in this case, due to the plastic design that the earphones have, they might come loose. And now we get into the performance section of this review. First off, call quality. In terms of recording quality that these earphones have, they're pretty much like their predecessors. Call quality is decent, although it's not great. It does pick up ambient sound, so if you're in a busy environment, your recipient will find themselves a little bit hard to hear what you're saying. Worth bearing that in mind that other earphones out there from some of its competitors do offer better call quality. Next up is ANC. Now, I did say before that I found it slightly odd that the ANC wasn't in like the home page of the app, and instead you have to go through the settings. Now, this might seem a bit trivial, but if you're boasting about ANC and you've got ANC, surely you'd want to shout about it. Having tested these in comparison to the Libratone Track Air Plus and the best Sony WF-1000XM3s in terms of noise cancellation earphones, I can see why Sennheiser isn't shouting about them. This is because these ANC performance is somewhat laughable. Now, for earphones that cost £279 or $300, or how much it might be in your local currency, ANC performance is pretty poor, to say the least. The Libratone Track Air Plus, which costs about £100 less, completely outperformed these earphones. Moving up to the Sonys, it was kind of a night and day difference, to the point where with the Sony earphones, you'd think that these don't even have noise cancellation technology built in at all. It's that bad. It's very disappointing to see this with the Sennheiser earphones. It's the same case I found with the Sennheiser over-the-ear earphones, although the difference wasn't as night and day different. In this case, the True Wireless earphones kind of let themselves down with noise cancellation performance. But what about sound quality? Well, its predecessors were one of the best True Wireless earphones I'd ever heard. At the time, I'd reviewed around 15 True Wireless earphones, and the True Wireless market was relatively new. Now, however, I've heard over 45 different True Wireless earphones. But I'll be pleased to say that these are still the best True Wireless earphones out there on the market. The thing is now, due to increased competition, the earphones don't sound as good as its competitors, because its competitors have somewhat caught up. Let me explain why. So in comparison to the Anker earphones, which are far cheaper, around 130 odd pounds, these might not have the same clarity in terms of the mid-range of the Sennheiser earphones, but in terms of overall width and depth, in terms of the soundstage, and also in terms of their mid-bass response, it's pretty impressive. Given that they're about £100 cheaper, it's pretty impressive to say the least. In comparison to the Libratone Track Air Plus, which have got a decent mid-range, a good mid-bass response versus the Sennheisers, they don't have that open wide sound signature. So they do lack that open wide sound, but again, these are around £100 cheaper. Then in comparison to the Creative Outlier Air, which are around £200 cheaper, these earphones have the same width and depth. If anything, their soundstage is equivalent to the Sennheisers, which previously was unheard of. but they don't have the same mid-range clarity, don't have the mid-bass response, and just sound a lot more warmer and somewhat recessed. So, again, these are the best sounding true wireless earphones on the market. They've got a great overall tonality, they've got great sort of imaging, good overall soundstage, good mid-range reproduction, and good tight mid-bass response with a good sub-bass extension. However, the difference isn't as night and day as it used to be back in the days of its predecessors, where at the time it was literally like hearing two different earphones. Now, it's like hearing slightly different alterations or a little bit of inequalities in some frequencies over its competitors. On the whole, I think Sennheiser have done a good job over its predecessors. The issue is Sennheiser, I think, over here have been benchmarking over their predecessors, which I felt like were somewhat of a trial run. They had issues with their battery life, in terms of connectivity, and just overall, they just weren't that great, but they sounded fantastic. These do all the things that the Momentum True Wireless 1 did, but just do it better. The issue is that Sennheiser has, is they're coming at £279, which is a pretty high premium for true wireless earphones, and yet its competitors are now cheaper and offer better sound quality than ever before. So it's up to you in terms of if you want to spend £279 or $300 or wherever you might live. In my case, I can see myself recommending these to pure audiophiles. However, if you take audiophiles out the equation, or if you don't mind sacrificing in certain frequencies or overall soundstage, then there are far better alternatives, be it from better noise cancellation technology to just better overall battery life, or even in terms of design, in terms of how portable they might be. That's my personal opinion. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these earphones, and definitely, as always, like, favorite and share and subscribe if you want to continue seeing honest, unbiased and unpaid reviews. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye bye.